and is eventually representing you in Congress, will be representing one of the fastest growing districts in the country. We're playing musical chairs here. Just to give you a little background, I was invited to do this. I'm glad to do it. Yeah, I think this will be one of a number of opportunities you have to hear from these candidates, and of course later some that were not able to attend today. And I hope we hope we'll facilitate a good discussion. This is a forum, not a debate, and we're going to try to keep them to the time. But we want you to to hear from these candidates, make your own impressions, tell your friends about it, and use it as you start to. To foster some decisions, but for a lot of you, this is your first opportunity, and my first opportunity to get to know some of these candidates a little better. Okay, thank you very much. Starting with, we'll just go down my left, starting with Ms. Elmers. Just introduce your name, then we'll come back and do opening statements.
Hi, y'all. Kent Keirsey.
Van, we will start with you on that end to do opening statements.
Good.
Thank you.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for coming out and having us all here. This is a true honor to be talking to you today. I'm not a career politician. Nobody in my family has ever run for office, but I do come from a family of service. Both my grandfathers were combat veterans. My dad's a combat veteran. When I was 9 years old, which is the age of my son now, I was woken up in the middle of the night by my dad, who pulled my blanket away because I used to sleep with his poncho liner. So came up with his blanket. He needed it, stuffed it in his rucksack, and he flew off to go to the first Gulf War. I didn't see him again for 15 months. So I know what the families down at Fort Bragg are going through right now. I was one of those families. Their loved ones in Ukraine. And when I turned 17, growing up here in North Carolina and growing up in that family, I had no doubt in my mind that America is the greatest country on the face of the planet. It was worth fighting for. So I went up to West Point, and when I was there, 9/11 happened. And I knew that was the right place at the right time to serve my country. Then I served honorably in the infantry. I got selected I went to Iraq in 05-06, was selected to be an instructor at U.S. Army Ranger School. But I had this sinking feeling in my gut that perhaps the fight for freedom wasn't over there. Perhaps the fight for freedom was right here at home. So I dedicated the next 10 years of my life to figuring out what truly makes this country great. Went up to law school. I studied the Constitution. I studied our rights. I studied the things that truly keep us safe and make us free, which is our freedoms. And then I went off and I met these veterans out there at law school that come across and build businesses from the ground up. And I said, man, that's the way to add value to the world. You put together a team, you come up with an idea, and you build things. You hire people, you create value in the world. And I spent 10 years building companies. We settled down here in North Carolina, raised 2 kids. We had some success. And this past year, about a year ago, I had a feeling in my heart that I want to get back to service. And so me and my wife, Caroline, who's here today, we prayed about it, and we decided we're going to run for office. But then also something else happened. The Afghanistan withdrawal happens, and it put a shot in my arm. It made me realize, just like on 9/11, I was in the right fight to serve our country at the right time. Because even though that was a disastrous withdrawal and it was totally Joe Biden's fault, nobody was pointing fingers at the true culprits. The true culprits of why we were in Afghanistan for 20 years across multiple administrations was Congress. And why did nobody blame Congress? It's because we gave up on Congress a long time ago. What we need to do is we need to send competent people to Congress that have done hard things in the real world. People are going to fight for our freedoms, secure our border, protect our families and our rights and our way of life, and get Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi out of power so we can start making America great again. I appreciate it.
Thanks everybody for their opening statement. We're going to run through a few questions here, kind of in the rapid fire. So we're looking for about a 30-second to 1 minute answer. And I want to start on the issue of Ukraine. If you could tell us one thing that the United States and the Biden administration is doing right with the situation in Ukraine, and one thing that we are doing wrong and should you do different, and we'll start with Chad, go back, and then come to you.
I would say that the one thing we've done well that I'd point out is under the Trump administration, we started sending Javelin missiles to the Ukrainians and training them. And those arms are what's keeping Russia at bay right now. And Joe Biden slowed that down, of course, slowed down the arms shipments, pulled those troops out of the way so that Putin would get the idea that we weren't going to resist at all and come in. And then, you know, I think everybody else covered it. Under Trump, we were pushing our allies to not rely on Russian oil, to bolster their defense. Under Biden, we stopped that. That's why we're in this situation today. And we can't stop thinking about this Afghan withdrawal. And if we didn't show that much weakness, Putin wouldn't have thought that we were weak and would have attacked.
It's a show of hands question. Do any of our candidates believe that U.S. Air Force based troops ought to be enforcing a no-fly zone in Ukraine?
The United States?
Yeah, the United States. Our military. Does anybody think that our military ought to be involved in a no-fly zone in Ukraine? All right, so we have some agreement there. Okay, thank you. Now, another show of hands, or not a show of hands. The first vote, if you are ultimately elected in this race, would be for what I think all of us would hope is a Republican U.S. House Speaker. Anybody here planning to not vote for the current House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy? Well, we got some agreement here. Okay. Now, I'm going to start with this question to Devan and work our way back. A question about our situation on the border and immigration. All of these candidates are certainly for doing something about the uncontrolled border on the South, as we've all seen. At the same time, as you drive through Johnston and Harnett counties, you still see tobacco fields. You still see people in need of labor. And closing the border does not necessarily fix the immigration system. So my question is, besides securing the border, if we could do that, what needs to happen next to make sense out of America's convoluted immigration system? Devan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm Kent Keirsey. I think it's clear that we need zero illegal immigration in this country. Absolutely, that should be the goal. And step one is we have to secure our border. We have to close it down. And that doesn't just mean build the wall. We do need to build the wall, but we also need the resources down there to patrol the wall. As an infantryman, as a combat veteran, I've secured a perimeter before. If you're not watching your perimeter, people are walking into it. You have to have people providing overwatch. And we need to use people. We need to use technology. But that's more than that. We also need to stop signaling to the world that people can come here and get a handout. They need to come here to do hard work. That's what American Dream is. It's about working hard to earn your living. And for too long, we've been saying to people and showing people throughout the U.S., these socialist policies are pulling people into our country. We wouldn't have a crisis at the border. We wouldn't have people trying to come across the border if we weren't telling them, you can come here and get a handout and not work. It would go away. We'd still have evil men out there trying to push fentanyl across our border. And we would still have people that are coming through trying to do it legally. They would have to process to do hard work. We should support those folks. We should welcome them here as long as they're willing to work hard. But the number one thing we need to do is keep people from coming in illegally, and then we can solve every other problem. Thank you.
Jessica, we'll start with you on this question and work down this way and go back to the other end. And certainly feel free to disagree with my premise of the question here, but it seems to me that with Republicans there is a tension with big tech, in that we generally don't favor overregulation and government involvement in the free market system. Nobody has to get on Facebook. Nobody has to get on Twitter or Instagram. At the same time, this is having an enormous effect on the ability for both Republicans to communicate, the appropriate communications of children. A lot of directions you can go with this, but I guess my question is, if you were a member of the House of Representatives, what would be your view on what Congress needs to do anything about, quote unquote, big tech, if anything?
As a father, I got 2 young kids, and I got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I was lucky. I grew up in a world before there was all this stuff going on in social media, these big tech companies. And I miss those days, to be honest. It was a lot simpler back then. Wasn't worried about what's going to happen. My kid when they're going to get a phone, and what they're going to see on that phone and who's going to influence them. And I also just can't stop thinking this cancel culture has just got to stop. People need to be able to think again on their own. And these big tech companies, they're shutting down people that have other points of view. We wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't be so divided as a country if we didn't have them pulling us apart. And so a lot of times people say, we shouldn't regulate. The reason we shouldn't regulate is because regulations favor the incumbents. Facebook is out there asking to be regulated. And there's a reason. They have 2,300 lawyers ready to go navigate those regulations. They want to stop that next great company from being built. So we've got to be very careful about how we think about our technology companies here. I'm all about our free speech. We should protect it. We should cherish it as a country. But when Russia puts $100 million into Facebook to buy ads for both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, there's something wrong going on. It's being used by our adversaries against us. Used to be our technology companies, used to be our companies had our back during World War II. You remember that. These days, I'm not so sure.
Thank you. So, and go this way. We're going to ask you.
Oh, no, I was just saying, these are great questions.
Oh, well, blind squirrel in a nut, we're going to go about 2 or 3 more questions and then closing statements. We want to be appreciative of everybody's time today, and thank you for being here. Chad, we'll start with you. President Trump remains one of the most popular figures in the Republican Party. He has endorsed one of the candidates that chose not to attend this forum today. On the other hand, Mr. Trump continues to focus much of his anger on the previous election, and he continues to be a divisive figure in the country. What is the proper role of the former president in the modern day Republican Party and in this race in particular?
Again, it's Kent Keirsey. I think we need to remember that this race, I can't wait till 2024. I know all of you can't either, but this race right here is extremely important. North Carolina families are suffering. We got inflation is growing. We got to secure our southern border. We got to get Nancy Pelosi out of power. We got to send the best candidate from this crew to Washington to stop that, from stopping her, to stop them from pushing the socialist agenda across America. We need to do that this year. So I think that we need to be laser focused on that. And then we need to rally behind our presidential candidates in 2024. I think we're all hoping it'll be Donald Trump, but we'll see what happens. Now, I think Donald Trump might have got some bad advice on this race. So I ask you guys to make your own judgment on who's the best candidate to send up to Washington. And that's all I have. I'll give the rest of my time.
Thank you. That's everybody. So this new district that contains, I had a nice tour of it on the way down here today. The southern parts of Wake County, fast growing, moderate Republicans, a lot of liberals. The parts of Harnett County, all of Johnston and all of Wayne, it seems to me is somewhat of a microcosm of a lot of what we see in America and particularly North Carolina. Very fast growing suburbs, some parts of downtown core, farming and rural communities. So 2-part question, and we'll go 90 seconds on this and then we'll move to closing statements. how can you, as a member of Congress, bridge the urban-rural divide to effectively represent this community? And what about you makes you particularly talented and able to represent a district as such you are running in? And we'll start with Devan and come down this way, that way.
I'd say there's 3 reasons. 1, I'm a dad. 2, I'm a small business owner, builder. And 3, I'm a combat veteran. And as a dad, I have kids. My kids will be in school in the district. And I will know exactly what North Carolina families are going through in our district. As a small business owner, I've employed folks from throughout the district, from Johnson County, Wake County. I don't know if I got Harnett on there, but I'll check. Got to check the rolls. It's pretty far out there. But, I've employed folks from around the area. And then as a combat veteran, we have communities here. We have Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. We're on the doorstep of Fort Bragg down there. So I'll know that community really well as well. And I'll be spending time with them. So I think those 3 things make me qualified to represent this district very well. And I'll be proud to do it if you elect me to Congress. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. That's going to wrap up our Q&A part of this. But before we move into closing sections, let's give a big round of applause for all these candidates. I speak for the people out here and the people watching online and the people who will read about this later, to say that the 13th is going to be well represented, and we appreciate your commitment to public service. We're going to go 1 minute for the closing statements, and since chivalry is still alive here in Harnett County, I'm going to start with the women. I'm going to go to Jessica, and then Renee, and then work back and end with Devan. So Jessica, 1 minute, close us out here. Thank
I think we all can agree that these are serious times. And we need serious people in Washington representing us. We need to get our economy back on track. We need to secure our border. We need to take down the socialist agenda and get Nancy Pelosi out of power. We need people with strong conservative values. Values that have been tempered by real world experience, doing hard things, making hard choices. Up in Washington, making hard choices, asking tough questions, and holding our government accountable. I'm the only one up here that's served in combat, puts life on the line for this country. I've built businesses from the ground up, and I'm raising a wonderful family. And I'm a little biased in that, but they're a wonderful family. And I've been living through what we've all been living through the last couple of years. I've had enough. I want to go up to Washington. I want to fight for you. I want to fight for this community in North Carolina, the greatest state in the country, of the greatest country on the face of the planet, and make sure that our values are heard up there and that we hold them to account to make this government work again for us. Thank you.